versus you. It's you 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 versus you. Time to clear your mental, everything you've been through. Looking in the mirror like you're the one with the issues. You against yourself, feel like you against the world. Internally battling all of the trauma.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Saquon, and I'd like to welcome you all back to the You vs. You podcast. This is episode 7 of the You vs. You podcast, and this is a very special episode because it's very near and dear to me. It's incredibly personal. This is my 444 moment. Shout to Hove. So some of you that have been following me for a while now, all 14 of you, you understand that this is a documentation of my mental health journey. You understand that I had a midlife crisis that led to a series of cathartic moments that were jarring, that brought me to the realization that I needed to make changes in my life. I sought mental therapy, but I never really talked about I talked about a little bit, that process of actually finding a therapist that would actually fit well with what I felt like my needs were at the time, considering that I had limited experience in the mental health realm. I had been doing some research, read a few books, so I was able to ask some jarring questions in the free consultation that every potential therapist gives you, but I felt like I wasn't getting what I needed from those conversations. I had some stipulations additionally. I wanted to speak with someone that was a male. I wanted to speak with someone that looked like me. Long story short, I wasn't able to find that. Not saying that they don't exist, so please don't take that the wrong way. Just in the time frame that I was looking, I wasn't able to find it. And my situation was becoming progressively more dire. And frankly, I needed to get on someone's couch. I had met with what came to be my therapist initially, but because I had those stipulations, I didn't choose him right away. I kept looking for someone else. The short of it is I ended up going in that route, but shortly on my mental health journey, I remembered that I couldn't find what I was looking for. And the way that my mind works, if I catch something, I grab it, right? I want to immerse myself in it. So I started studying, doing these things. So I said, well, hey, why not create an anecdotal documentation of my own journey? Because if I feel like this, then it's probably a strong possibility that others that look like me feel that way. So in doing that, it's been incredibly freeing for me because I found what I believe to be my purpose. And with purpose comes responsibility. So I feel like I have a responsibility. Not only do I have a responsibility, I have a fiduciary responsibility to speak to current viewers, anyone that may potentially become a viewer, and be authentic and be real. And the only way to do that is I have to show what that monster is. So with that being said, this episode is very near to me, it's special to my heart, because I'm featuring my ex-wife, Candace Lee. Welcome to the show.
Are we going to shake hands? That's what we're going to do?
Well, I shake everyone's hand. We're going to actually do our dap up at the end because I think that would really be dope.
Yeah, it would be.
But before we get into this thing, first of all, again, thank you very much for consenting to do this. It means so much to me. But I want y'all to know, okay, I need to provide color, all right? This isn't like a Zen moment of healing, like you have a divorce and then you have years of being apart and then we come back as friends and we've been spending time together. No, like this has been a real serious separation. Like I haven't seen my ex-wife in quite some time. She and I haven't spoken to one another in quite some time, save one phone call when I initially asked her to be a part of the podcast and she gracefully accepted. So what was that phone call like for you?
Well, to be honest, I was taken aback. I'm not gonna lie. As Saquon said, we hadn't spoken to each other since I believe it was July of last year, I think. Whatever. It was a long time. It sounds about right. But it was a while. And so it was just a little bit of alarm for me. Initially, it came through as a text message where Saquon said, hey, you know, if and when you have space, I'd like to speak with you. And I immediately went into prayer because I was afraid, not just from a personal standpoint, but just everything that had gone on between the both of us. And then the lapse in time, I thought, what could this be? And there was a lesson in that too. So I'll share that with you. But immediately I said, God, what are you trying to teach me? So you viewers don't know this, but when I am a little bit nervous, or if I'm like in a situation where things are uncertain, I will find the silver lining, but I'll laugh along the way. And I immediately go into things like, God, what are you trying to teach me? So that's initially how it felt for me. And I said, whatever this is, I pray that you allow me to be open. And this is before you even called me, before we even spoke. I just said, I pray that you allow me to be open, that you allow me to, still have firm boundaries. Because again, lapse in time, we hadn't spoken. But just to not assume anything. And so after I went and prayed and did all of that, I said, hey, yeah, I have space. When would you like to have this conversation? And him being the person that he is, he said, I'm free now. So I said, okay, cool, give me a call. And after that fact, it turned out to be a situation that I didn't expect, but also, again, it was a lesson for me not to assume anything because it wasn't negative. He started off, hey, how you doing? We shared our pleasantries. And he said, he had a little bit of humor in there, but he said, would you be featured on this podcast? And without hesitation, I said yes, only because I knew this isn't just for him. It's for me. But more importantly, and again, I say this a lot, Q can tell you, or Saquon can tell you, I always think about what's bigger than me. And this is all bigger than both of us. I immediately went into a space of this could be not only a closure or healing for us, but for those who are maybe experiencing the same thing. This may benefit someone in some way. So those are all the emotions that kind of went on with me in the initial phone call.
I like that. So you went into a prayer moment, which indicates to me a solid level of awareness. So awesome. And then you immediately went into, okay, what my boundaries are. Okay. So if he needs to borrow $250, that's okay. But we'll draw the line at $300. He can't come to the house, but we can meet at the gas station over here. All right. We can shake hands, not hug. No. Boundaries are very important.
Yeah.
So the phone call was incredibly cathartic for me. It had been something that I'd been toying with, the idea of reaching out and featuring you on the podcast. I was initially apprehensive. I didn't feel jarred to where I needed to take it to my therapist. I felt like I acquired enough tools to be able to sit with my emotions and come to a solid conclusion on my own. So I felt really, really, really good about that. But yeah, I feel like it was great to speak to you again. And then even though it was a short conversation, after such an extended lapse in time, that was the first conversation that we had that wasn't shrouded in anger, disappointment, let down. So, and because when those things began to happen, I feel like we didn't really know one another anymore. So to sort of, feel that again, and that was really cool. So the call was very freeing for me. I do these magic hour medicines on Instagram, and the day after I did a magic hour medicine episode about that. And I talked about how I felt free. I was able to have like an outer body experience while I was having that conversation. And I felt really good. I felt like this was an evolved person that was talking. This is a person that's choosing healing and growth and choosing to let go of a limited identity. So I felt really good about that. So again, I really, really, really appreciate you taking that call because you didn't have to be in the space to do that. And had you not, I think anyone would have respected that.
Yeah.
So again, thank you. So now leading up to, what we're doing today. So I needed to watch a portion of our wedding video to kind of bring me back to that space, mentally, emotionally, cognitively, etc. So I can make sure that this is done correctly. And then remember the Saquon or the Q that I was then. Now, when you were talking in that video, when it initially came on, you said that he was the first guy that said, this is how we're going to do things. And I really like that about him. And he challenges me to be my best self. And fast forward, the wedding, we're years in. What began to happen, and I had to be honest, is, and we express this in our community in an unhealthy way. It's mired in toxicity. You're not an alpha man. You're not a masculine man. You're not this, you're not that. Yeah. I think a more healthy, a more palatable way, and a more honest and transparent way for me to express it to you, and ultimately the viewers, is you said those things about me, but as the years went on, there was a gradual erosion of credibility. What are your thoughts on that?
I can agree. It's hard because I think life is hard, and marriage is work. I don't like to say marriage is hard because anything that's worth having, you might need to work at it a little bit. But I do agree that there was a time where I felt as though I didn't get the follow through from you. And that was hard. It was disappointing for me, but also I also have to take accountability because there were times where I, could have overstepped or didn't allow for the space for that as well. And that's growth that I needed to work on. But I did feel that there were times where we weren't seeing eye to eye on what I needed from you as a partner.
Yeah, so the gradual erosion of credibility. So to peel that onion back a little bit more and to get granular. So what happened is, so my ex-wife is incredibly accomplished, right? And I had a front row seat to witness this, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But to stay here, in summation, there was constant growth on your part, and I was steadily remaining the same. So while there was a time where I was this guy to say these things and then challenging you to be your best self, it got to a point to where I could no longer offer that level of stimulation, that level of challenge in that type of capacity.
Understood.
It took a lot to accept that, to come to that realization, and the mental health journey has been a huge catalyst in producing those levels of realization.
I think from my point of view, and I'm going to share this just because I know couples struggle with this, women in particular struggle with this. I struggled with this. So just speaking from my own personal experience, I was very, very passive when I was young. And there was a point in adulthood in my late 20s where I said no more. But it was never in a boasty way. It was just let me follow through and keep true to what I said I was going to do. So as Q mentioned, everything that I say I'm going to do, I'm going to do it. He saw me through a couple of degrees and, what have you, accomplishments through work, whatever. But I never looked at that as, oh, I'm better than anyone, right? Because if I can do it, someone else can do it. And I hoped that, I said I wasn't going to do this, but I'm getting emotional. I had always hoped that Saquon didn't see that as a threat or as competition. When you're in a marriage, when you're in a relationship, doesn't matter the status, you shouldn't be in competition. To me, that shouldn't be a thing, but I see it more often than not. And I felt as though it could have been a bit much, even though he didn't say it, even though I didn't walk in that way of, throwing it in his face. And you can share if I'm not telling the truth, but I felt as though maybe I should take a step back and dim my light so it doesn't make him uncomfortable. And I think that's a failure on my part, because I don't think anyone should have to do that. But also there's a growing that has to happen that Saquon is just talking about, where he had to accept that because he was in a marriage. So there's a lot of different dynamics that go on with that type of cycle. And I think that can be hard. Watching it is hard. Watching it is hard because you want your person to be cheering for you, but deep down inside, you kind of question, like, are they really in my corner? Not saying that I'd never thought you wouldn't be, but I think as you go through the motions of that and you're seeing your partner elevate and you feel stagnant, or vice versa, you're elevating and you see your partner feel stagnant, you feel helpless, because it's like, I want to do more and I'm not going to apologize for my ambition, but I don't want to leave this person behind or make them feel like they're left behind. So there's a lot that goes on with that, and I think it needs to be talked about a lot.
Absolutely. So let's just call it what it is. You're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head. This was something that I couldn't allow myself to accept at the time because of ego, and then also I didn't have the tools of honesty. I didn't have the tools of accountability, awareness, etc. So there came a time where, yes, I was jealous of your growth. I never felt like it was a competition, and I never not wanted you to be successful, and I would have never, under any circumstance, not been in your corner. But it's the sting of rebuke.
Yeah.
So it's the accomplishments that you're witnessing that are constantly reminding you or reminding me of what I'm not doing. And then it was a scary thing because I didn't know how to get out of my own way. And it was something that I desperately wanted to do. I did want my marriage to work, but I was inept. I had a thought a moment ago. Again, this is a difficult conversation, so please bear with us. So that sting of rebuke, and I know that those feelings were wrong, and I can tell that I really couldn't give you the pat on the back that you needed. I mean, I would say those things, but it was shallow, it was empty. You can't fabricate.
Yeah, I remember a time particularly where I felt that, and that was really hard. Really hard. Because again, you're feeling for yourself, but you're also feeling for your partner. So, and there's no handbook on this stuff. Of course, there are self-help books and podcasts and talks and things. I know we're on a podcast now, so don't take that the wrong way. But no one truly has the answers to this stuff. There's no right or wrong. So you can seek advice and guidance to the best of your ability. But when you're dealing with these emotions, it's hard because it's like, who do I go to? What do I do? And then even when you do get the advice, am I making the right choice? Am I thinking the wrong things? Is there something better that I can be doing? All of those things are happening simultaneously, and it's a lot.
Yeah.
And again, this is just me speaking from my personal experience of, the things that I was feeling at the times that you're talking about.
Yeah, so ultimately I fell on my sword and asked for a divorce, which was very, very, very difficult to do, even though I seemingly did it in a way that may have came across as if it was easy. But I understand the trauma in that as well. But I want to jump around. I said that, and I say, with you saying what you just said, there had to come a time where, even if you may have, and I'm sure you may have expressed it to someone, that's why we have people that we confide in, but there had to come a time where you came to the realization that, listen, I do, for lack of a better term, have to leave this person behind. What was that like?
It was extremely difficult. No one gets married thinking that you're going to get divorced. At least I didn't. And the way in which, and then we're going to get a little granular here. The way in which Saquon had asked for a divorce was traumatizing. Because that was a deal breaker for me. That wasn't the first time that he said those words to me. And we had gone and sought some guidance, and he knew that was a deal breaker for me. So I was thinking in my head, if he asked for this again, that's going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. And then when he did, that was the moment where I said, I have to choose me. But in choosing me, it was probably the hardest decision ever, because I have a bleeding heart, I have an open heart, but also you feel inadequate, unworthy, you feel embarrassed, you feel all of these emotions all the time at once. And thinking back to when I said, you know what, I'm going to choose me. I didn't think that I would ever be in that situation. So I was hurt. I was scared. I was terrified. And again, it's like all these rushing emotions came back, and the little girl in me felt abandoned. And that's hard. That's hard. And it didn't feel good. Again, it was very, very traumatizing. So unbeknownst to Q, when that happened, when he asked for the divorce, like, I was very still. I don't know if you remember that night. I was very still, and I kind of just didn't say much thank you. I didn't say much because, again, it was a little bit traumatizing, but I eventually, time had passed, and we were working on our separation. And I don't know how many times I asked God, I was like, listen, and I talked to God like this, listen, I don't know what's going on. This is hard, and what do you want me to do? I sought spiritual guidance. I did all the things I know to do for myself. There were days where I would just sit and cry at my altar, like, is this real? Like, is this really happening? Or should I reconsider? But a part of me felt like, in choosing me, and I know this may sound strange, but I felt like in choosing me, I'm allowing you to make the best decision for yourself too. Because I honestly think, had I not gone through with, the filing and everything, that although Saquon asked for the divorce, I don't know that it would have happened. And I don't want to speak for you, but yeah, I just think that it was a space and time where that moment, there was a realization in me, like, you can't keep going through this cycle. At some point you have to break it. because you know how that cycle ends and you're making a choice. So in making choices, are you going to do better or are you going to stay in familiarity? And I said, I've stayed in familiarity long enough. I need to see what this other side is.
Profound. So you said a lot of things, but
Sorry.
no, that's the purpose of the podcast, and the viewership will certainly appreciate you for it. All right, so you said that I said something that was a deal breaker for you, and I had known that because that was expressed on a previous medium, couples counseling. So now this is dedicated to you, the viewer, and we're using me. So Saquan Lee is the guinea pig. So we have what are triggers, right? So when we're triggered emotionally, right? Because unbeknownst to us, we have a series of made up presets psychologically that are known as your defensive variable processing, okay? So when you process this way, when you're triggered, right, you'll sting, it's hurtful for some, because it may not rear its face that way. It may rear its face as coping mechanistic behavior. It may rear its face as needy behavior, right? So with my situation, it reared its face in all of those areas. So I would react explosively, and I would say the most hurtful thing that I can immediately think of in that time frame to convey to my partner or anyone who triggered me, so I can convey the level of hurt. But because hurt people, and we're dealing with learned behaviors, without the tools in my toolbox, expressing this in a healthy way was something that was impossible at the time. So we communicate with the pain. So in order for you to feel it, I have to inflict it upon you. Now this is very important because this is dangerous, because this is traumatic and torturous behavior. And Jordan Peterson speaks about this beautifully. The more intelligent you are, the more your torture is, because your mind will fabricate many justifications, endless justifications as to why your defense variable processing is right. So you said that you felt a string of emotions, and in sitting here now in a healthy way, I think that I've earned the sight, I've earned the lens of empathy. So I think that this is probably the first time that I can actually hear what you're saying. And it does have an impact on me. And I can see, I can recount the experiences and again, see that impact. So now we're in a separation, and I'm working on my process. I'm going to therapy. We're unhashing things, and it was sort of like I had to compartmentalize because, well, first I want to say this. Okay, so I appreciate you and I appreciate our experience.
Same.
Because divorcing you was the hardest thing that I've ever had to do in my life. And that produced the catharsis to want to begin the change.
Yeah.
So I'm dealing with the emotions, but I had to compartmentalize because although this was emotionally jarring, I had issues all the way back in my past that were unreconciled, which was producing this cyclical reality for me. So, and that's okay, this mental health thing, you have to be honest.
Brutally honest.
I alluded to this in the last episode with D. Shout out to D. I said you have to be scathingly honest. You have to be brutally honest. You have to face your monster. You have to undress it as it undresses you. And your weapon is your truth and your authenticity. Because if you're not true and authentic, the lies that you tell yourself will become places that you can potentially hide in. And when you hide and you run from that, you don't know when your next cathartic moment is going to happen that's going to be jarring enough to produce that. It may not ever happen again. So in that sense, so everything happens for its highest purpose. Everything happens for you to ultimately become your best self. So I'm dealing with all of these traumatic things, and then that's when I had to learn how to frame. And I did an episode about that earlier on, maybe about 8 months ago, because I had to frame in some weird and obscene ways, right? Some frames required hatred of you to get up and stay dedicated to train and keep doing these things. My mother, my father. But I gotta shout out Brett Smith, who's my therapist, because he really challenged me to really start looking at this shit. And I had to look at my inner monologue, the things that I was telling myself every day. I had no concept of self-worth. I had no self-love. And that's dangerous because I really shouldn't have been married at that time. And it's not that you weren't worthy of being a wife, because I think that you're an incredible woman.
I appreciate that.
But it's too much of a liability. And then what you can potentially produce when you talk about offspring, when you talk about the hardships. Like, you look at your life now, you look at all the things that you're experiencing. You're traveling the world, you met your father, you have all of this happiness in your life. And the situation, the emotional draining, the baggage of the situation, like a parasite, was eating at that. So it's a possibility that some of those things may not have happened if you didn't pull that trigger.
Well, I want to take a step back because I think what has to happen though is sometimes we got to give ourselves grace, because yes, it was a hard situation. It's very emotional, very traumatizing, but I have to give you grace. I have to give everyone grace if I want the same grace bestowed upon me, right? And what I'm saying by that is I wouldn't call it a parasitic moment eating away at that. Because I think those things still would have happened. Yeah, it might have looked different. The packaging might have been different. But I think you got to offer yourself grace too, because marriage takes two. So there's things I don't want to convey on this podcast that I'm a perfect person. I'm not. And part of growth and healing is understanding yourself as a whole. And I know myself as a whole. There are things that I still got to work on, but I'm not perfect. So I know I've done things that rubbed Q the wrong way that could have produced some of the things. Now, don't get me wrong, we make choices on how we respond. But I say that to say, there are joys in my life now, yes, but that's because I decided, I made a choice to not sit in the sorrows of things and find that joy now. I don't think joy is a destination. I don't think happiness is a place. I think it's a being, a state of being that we choose. And I'll say this, when Q and I were separated, I apologize. Can I call you Q?
Approved.
When Q and I were separated, there were times where we would, this is prior to him moving out and us not talking. There were times where we would have discussions where I would say, is there something I could be doing better? Or he would say, why are you still here? And, I would have all these excuses and things playing in my mind. Or even prior to that, I was, so focused on what he wasn't doing, or so focused on, not saying it, but just, hey, let's, maybe we should think about this, and to him, it probably came off as nagging. I hope not, but I was very inquisitive. Fair, but I didn't do it a lot, but what I will say is I think the revisiting those things for him was tugging on his insecurities and his inadequacies, but also in my work, it was, you got to step out of the way. You got to allow him to make his own choices. You got to allow him to be who he's going to be. And it wasn't until I started focusing on me, and that's not saying, forget your partner and let them go off and be willy-nilly, but it wasn't until I actively made the choice to focus on the joys rather than the hurts. Even though we were separated, sleeping in separate rooms in our house, I had to let that go. I had to let go of all the angers and all the things. So I say that to say, I think those joys and the things that I'm experiencing now would have still come. They might, they might have looked different, but I don't want you to say that let me not speak for you, but I would be hesitant to say that it's a parasitic moment just because I look at it as a learning. Our divorce, again, another choice that I had to make, was not looking at it as a failure, because every day that I woke up, I would be bawling my eyes out, looking like we failed. And it wasn't until I made the active choice to not look at it like that I was able to truly experience the learning, but also experience the joys outside of what me and Q used to have. And so that's what I mean by, let's give ourselves a little bit of grace with what we dealt with.
It was a hard journey for me to come to the place of joy. Initially, it was isolation, and that was a hard time for me. I sat over there in that corner in here. There was nothing in here for a year. And I looked around and I said, I don't have a damn thing to show for the last 10 years of my life. And reconciling that was a process. Because at the time, I didn't feel like I deserved that. Friendships, people chose sides.
You think so?
Yeah. I just had a real moment the other day, and it seems like I'm off track here, but I'm not, because I'm proud of myself. I had a couple of months ago, I had this realization, and I bawled my eyes out. Like what I thought my best friend was. I thought who my best friend was. I sat and I said, I went through a whole divorce out here. And not one time did you ever get in your car and be like, yo, let me go check on Saquon. Like I know he's stubborn, he's pig-headed, he's arrogant. But that's my man. Let me go see how he's doing. That didn't happen not once. So I was completely and utterly alone. And I hated people for that. But shout to my moms, because my mom said it. She was like, this is your home now. And I know it doesn't seem like it now, but this is exactly where you need to be. And in that isolation, I had to learn how to be accountable to me. I had to learn how to stand up for me. I had to learn how to shape myself into something, an image that I can see in the mirror and be proud of. And that's been a hell of a process. So that isolation, but in that you miss things, because you look at all that you lost, and you know, you let most of it go. But you know what is hard to let go? My fucking grill. My grill. And I'm gonna tell you why.
Oh my God.
I set that grill
I hate
up.
you for saying that.
I put all those presets on those Listen, I cut it on, and in 5 fucking minutes, it's ready to go.
Let me tell y'all something.
No. Now, I finally understand. The guy that we made fun of on Judge Mathis, I understand what he meant. He said, listen, you want to take my wife, that's fine. Y'all have a good time. But he want to take my wife and have her make him some chitlins. Chitlins take time.
This man ain't got
I understand that now. I worked on that grill. And now somebody's over there messing up those presets.
That's an assumption.
But it's attachments. And when I said I hate a lot of people, I had to learn that I was attaching to things that was prohibiting my growth, and that hatred is like drinking poison and hoping someone else gets sick. And Joe Dispenza said it best. He said, right, wrong, or indifference, the only person that toxicity is hurting is me. And I think at that point, my framing began to change, and it became more of the joy that you reference. And I had to learn how to find that joy, and find that joy in simple things. Find it in the gratitude meetings that I started at work, the lives that I'm able to impact, seeing people watch the podcast episodes and say, yo, this was dope and this helped me this way, that way, being present and having awareness in every interaction that I had. So now, because there was a long portion in my life where I was just all talk, but now there's tangible work to support all the things that I've said my entire life. And that's a hell of a feeling.
You know, you're not the only one that had to take that journey. I don't necessarily, we can agree to disagree, but I don't think that people chose sides, but maybe I understand where you're coming from. But I think I was also in a space of feeling lonely even before we got separated. And so I had to refocus, again, shift my focus to what do I actually want to do? What do I like? Get back into feeling like a woman, because I didn't feel worthy, wanted, any of those things. So there's a lot that goes into it, and it's not all pretty. To Q's point, that you sit in silence, and it's something that a lot of us can't do, because then you're stuck with your thoughts and you're stuck with the truth that you probably haven't heard in a while, because potentially you're surrounding yourself with, whether it's things or distractions or people that are feeding you inauthenticity. And that's not easy. And so I equally had to, and I know I'm saying this to say, I share in that thought. I share in those feelings of, on the outside. I say this all the time. I'm glad I don't look like what I've been through, because a lot of the stuff that I've been through in my life, people will never have the opportunity to go through, and thank God for that. But I'm really glad I don't look like what I've been through, because there's a lot of days where I could only muster up 3%. And that 3% was spent crying and sadness and feeling lonely and figuring out who I am. Who am I without I love being a wife. Who am I without that? Who am I without my partner? What does this new life look like? Is it even worth it? Like, there's a lot of days where it's bad. And some of my closest friends didn't even know that, because I do a bad job of asking for help or asking for guidance or even sharing all the time, because I never want to burden anyone else. or I just don't want to feel negative or feel like I'm complaining or, be that one person who's, on your line, like, here she go again. So I stuck it out by myself. Now I did have a couple friends that I would talk to and probably, share with, and there were certain people that I didn't feel like I could go to, just because you got to know the source and consider the source. But again, there's just a wave of emotions that almost took me out. I mean, I felt very, very broken for a very long time.
Yeah, so I want to talk about the villain and the hero. Because there are times where I was decent, I was loving.
There was a lot of good times.
But then there are times where I was incredibly toxic in behavior. Talk about the confusion that begets. Talk about the hurt, if you're able and willing, that produces, and how that eats at the fabric of your identity, your being, particularly in such a close interpersonal relationship.
Yeah. I think that with you, it was very hard because we started out as great friends, right? But I think even seeing, early on, like some of the things that you would say or just your temper, and then it would be a flip of the switch and it was different. And I was stuck, like, what do I do with this? How do we get past this? It leaves a lot of questions. Is this real? Is this love? Does he even like me? Does he love me? He says one thing, not saying that, you never showed it, but there were times where I felt uncertain. I felt unsafe emotionally. So I want to be very clear. There was nothing physical, but I didn't feel safe emotionally. And I think what that does is, no matter how strong you are, I like to think of myself as a strong woman, but no matter how strong you are, there are times, especially when you're dealing with your own traumas, as most people are, we're always going to be, it made me feel as though all of those, it brought me back to that space of, again, is this real? Are you worthy? Is this gonna last? Because I was left in a space of limbo sometimes. And when your safety is challenged, again, when that's root chakra. So when your safety is challenged in that way, whether that be physical, emotional, whatever, spiritual, it's like you feel, how can I say this? I feel like I was walking through and walking on eggshells and going through the motions rather than truly living with my partner, which was very hard. And I don't know what that looked like for you, or even if you saw that, in me, but it definitely ate at me in those moments.
Yeah, I referenced earlier intelligence, torture, because I recognize that. And what was the scariest for me is that I didn't know how to fix it. And I didn't want to face it. And then the ego prevented me from saying, okay, you need help with this thing. So red flags. And that's why the lived experience is such a great experience. And then even when you're on your journey, like there's a thing that we would say, when you do the work, it's easy to spot people that don't do the work.
Hello.
Because all of these things, my traumatic tendencies, arguably was present in the very beginning. When you can say that, it was 10 years damn near that I had spoken to my mom, my dad.
Yep.
I lived a very sheltered, secluded life. Like I had a bubble that I only felt comfortable in because that bubble the trauma wouldn't be exposed in that bubble, but outside of it, it would be. So that's why, again, we have to go on these mental health journeys. We have to come out whole on the other side because we don't assess correctly in our own personal lives, but especially when we're talking about the forming the fabric of a marriage, an interpersonal relationship, right? Oh, this person is cute. They say the right thing. She got a fat ass. She does that thing I like.
Right.
Right? But I have these blinders on, and I'm either inadvertently or I'm blatantly ignoring clear red flags.
Yep.
And being present and aware in those times, it could save your entire life. It can save you decades. It can save you 5 years, 2 years. So we really need to go on these journeys. And not just the journey. You need the tools in your toolbox that will equip you with the sites that I'm referencing.
Yeah.
But yeah, those red flags.
Do you mind me sharing?
Please.
All right. So what Q just mentioned is something that he and I used to say all the time. I've been on this healing journey for a very long time. And again, when you're on it, there's no getting off. If you're really doing the work, there's no getting off. And you can definitely, not in a judgmental way, but in a way that's like, oh, I can call that by name. You can see it in yourself. I share with my friends all the time. If you're asking for my advice, because I don't give unsolicited, but if you're asking for my opinion, my input, anything, I can only have the conversation with you because I've had it with myself. When I've been in those dark days, when I've been in the mirror looking at myself, when I've, so again, you can see those things in other people. And this healing journey is hard. And so part of that healing journey is accountability. And I have to take accountability because when I first met Q, I think we were at your apartment. And this is when I first learned that he hadn't like talked to his mom. They were texting, I think, at the time, but they were not like on the phone or flying to see each other in like 10 years, or maybe it was like 8 years. And then for his dad, it was 10 because his dad was living in London at the time. And for some, especially when you're coming from a family like mine, we get on each other's last living nerve, but I'm gonna see my family probably at least twice a year. I'm gonna call them. We're on the phone all the time. And so that was very odd for me, but the ego in me was like, I can fix it. I can help this man get to his family, and we're all gonna be family, and it's gonna be great. And that's very intrusive. But I also have to take accountability as I did see that as a little bit of a red flag, but I chose to ignore it. Because again, ego showed up and was like, yeah, he hadn't met you yet. So, you're going to come into his life and things are going to change. And that's very egotistic. And watching him go through that too was also hard. Because I wanted him to see and feel and truly experience what love was. And so in doing that, I could have been love bombing him without even realizing it. And my apologies for that.
Oh, no need to apologize. So then getting to the space to where you actually see, interact, and experience my family. And again, this is all raw.
Yeah.
So you see the toxic way in which we interact. What type of revelations did that reveal? If
It
any?
was, well, yeah. It's just confirmation that trauma passes on through generations. Watching the interaction with you and your mom and seeing the mommy wounds, watching the interaction with, again, do you mind me sharing?
No.
I'm going to share a little bit of a story. We won't go into granularity, but I was at work one day. This is when me and Q were actively dating, but it was very early on. And he was going to be seeing, again, we're going to get the family together. His dad, somehow or another, we made contact with Dad, and he's coming over to the States. Again, this is years after they've spoken to each other. I'm at work. He's going to see his brother and his dad. They're going to meet up, and it's going to be fine. I get a phone call of Q losing it, screaming, hollering. I don't know what's going on. I was scared. I leave everything and drive from Marietta to where they are, and him and his dad are having a major blowout. And I was like, what the hell did I just walk into, first of all? And then I was like, damn, should we have made contact with Dad? But then a part of me was like, well, maybe they need to do this to get through this. But then watching your partner go through that is also traumatizing, because you want them to be in a loving situation and not a toxic situation. So it was just, there were so many revelations of I'm just using that as an example to say, it was just evident of the hurt and the trauma that just passes on, especially as time passes on. Excuse me. And it was wild to say the least. But I commend you for how far you come, now, and getting over those hurdles. But early on, it was very, very apparent that you had a lot of family traumas that continuously get swept under the rug, and they hadn't been dealt with.
You mentioned it a while back, and I wanted to talk about that. And when we spoke, when we had that conversation, when I asked you to be on the podcast, I forgot how exactly I said it, but that's what I said. I don't view it as regret, but there was tragedy, and you referenced it a moment ago. For me, the tragedy was and is the loss of friendship. I think that we were great friends. I think that we were friends that were strong. I think there was a time where, again, and we talked about it the entire segment today, but there was a time where we both knew that divorce was imminent.
Yeah.
But I think that at a time we were friends strong enough to even survive that, in my opinion. I could be wrong. So that was the tragedy for me. Because losing my best friend was very difficult.
Yeah. There was once and I think I shared this in couples counseling, where I had mentioned to Saquon that I feel like I lost my friend. And we had worked to get through that piece or that patch. But later on, when we knew that divorce was imminent, I felt that feeling all over again. My friend is long gone, because the friend that I know wouldn't have treated me this way, or I wouldn't feel this way. Which could be a little bit selfish of me to say that. But those feelings are real, because I did feel that we were friends, and that even after the fact, when we were talking through divorce, and I just never imagined that I would go an extended period of time without speaking to Saquon. And that was hard because it's one thing to lose your marriage, which is hard too, but marriage and friendship intertwined is even harder. You know, there are folks who have gotten married and probably felt like, you know, you knew early on, but when there's true love there, despite what it looks like, and when there's friendship there, it's very difficult. Because you're losing your confidant, you're losing your, you know, case in point. I had to go and buy a freaking body pillow in order to sleep at night because I didn't know what to do. I was crying every day. I couldn't sleep. My hormones were all over the place because of the stress that I had put on myself behind getting divorced and such. It's a hard that is difficult to really articulate and explain. And again, when you have a friendship first, you never think that you'll end up here. And some people never get to do what we're doing right now. Hell, I didn't even think we were going to get to do what we're doing right now. But it was very difficult. Very, very difficult.
Lessons. I think that you showed me what unconditional love was. I think I taught you the value of self-love.
Absolutely.
So I reference, you know, the history with my family and trauma and all of those things because I didn't know how to love you. I didn't know how to not be toxic. Those were my learned behaviors. That was my environment. Hurt people. And it was a lot of hurt that I caused you. And I look at the sound of my voice, my stature, my veracity when I'm triggered. That's like 1,000 exclamation points on a fuck you.
There were several of those.
So I'm sorry for all of that. It took a lot of journeying. It took a lot of work to get to the space to say that. So I think the change behavior is the apology.
Yeah. And listen, again, I'm not a perfect person, so everything that I've ever put you through, I apologize for as well, because my only intention was for us to be in a space of love, and it's tragic that did not work out the way that we thought, but I am proud of you. At first, I will say I felt a little disappointed because I'm looking at what you're doing now, and in my mind, I was thinking, we did all of that just to get here, right? And why didn't he do that when we were together? Why didn't he take the action or take the steps? And why didn't he? But again, that's not a you thing. That was a me thing. That was my worthiness coming up. Like, was I not worthy for him to take those steps with me? Because maybe it could have been different. Maybe I wouldn't have been here, maybe. But again, I had to let that go. That was a journey. That was a hell of a journey. But despite it all, I am wholeheartedly proud of you, even though you blocked me. I am proud of you. And I hope you know that. Because this work is not easy. It's very dark. I told you that when you're getting on the bus. I said, listen, this ain't for the weak. It's not.
The person that I was when I made those vows, I really meant them. And I really wanted to honor them. Intentions aren't enough. Love isn't enough. So again, the man that I am now sincerely apologizes to you. Reconciliation is the peace that's found in the universal principles of growth and change, regardless of the outcome that that growth and change produces. Because if you allow it to be, it'll always be good on the other side. So this is what it looks like. If you found value here, and it's my sincere hope that you did, then please comment, like, subscribe. Follow the You versus You podcast. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And keep checking me out. And we'll keep busting this thing down. Peace.
Let me live. Now my mind's clear. It's you versus you. It's you versus you. It's you versus you. It's you versus you.